I guess like we are studying in an experience from like lack of currently without necessarily did not be able to like print Ichigo due to lack Ichigo being that reform and they that they at that point they must definitely turning that by then that Rukia would be showing up and for the current for severe Rukia that would be like seriously training Ichigo definitely not because of that by now Rukia would have regained back a lot of that access to powers. A great extent of access to powers might be the case customer experience with which lack of the delivery being able to that give that absolute serious and intense train to that to that the situations that the scenario that I'm talking about and definitely able to bring that limit like Urahara as well as like Geology's presence like the fact that both Yoruchi as well as that Urahara are now as a person training Ichigo and that them certainly allowing initially itself that right now that allowing that Ganju as well as like attaining Ganju as well as Benji to that instant range Ichigo. But definitely because of that definitely not just due to that single law defeat against that gen that like Ichigo had that one that definitely the more than that definitely able to bring that like both at the front security things like the enemies are blank bounce, specifically the rival bounce. Since according to my everything like so because like powers might naturally use tools that bounce powers and things these powers might naturally be advantages against that bounce powers might be that capability and level which that where Torahara as well as Yoruchi might be well fully aware of by now might be also the case definitely because that so at like the present situation I'm between that similar to my friends in that the cooperative or that both Yoruchi as well as that Sorakawa choosing not to like train Ichigo and placing all that thoughts on Ichigo to be that will be definitely do to let them at first let the situation like the battle against Jin to know placing their hopes on Ichigo being like the one to be able to like bring down Jin. But that can most likely that both for Hara as well as Yoruchi at first and like most likely placing all their efforts on that Ishida, the Kunchi Ishida. That's only due to like Ishida being a Kunchi being like of the military being like the one to that be able to like bring down Jin. Definitely might look very ambitious. So definitely at present like both Sorahara as well as like Orochi might be totally putting on that shade action in front of Ichigo while planning on like stealthily like literally training Ishida might be like plan stealthily not related to train Ishida to that may be able to like have Ishida not only be able to like regain that Ishida's like uh, quickly power but like also then to like get even more training to like Ishida basically to have like Ishida's like power quickly power be able to like grow even further so that like by then they would be having like the ultimate warrior ready through Shira that would be able to like bring down Jin. Would be along the lines would be along the lines of the different like Yoriji as well as like Ohara might be placing all that faith and confidence in that Shira and that's the thing that the because might be like that's the basis that more and definitely different like Rukia might be well fully aware of the fact that that might have even caused like the disturbance within that Rukia since that Rukia by now definitely might be having that absolute serious feelings of affection towards that Ichigo data. On top of that, like Rukia would be at by now at present would be only seeing Ichigo as threshold of her fear of failure and everything. So definitely to have like and to have such a person like Ichigo to for sure any there would be definitely would be something that would be definitely personal for like Rukia. And would be the last thing that Rukia would want to happen might be like that that this is very important of them. So that we are able to bring that about great like that and then that sort of yeah will be that disturbance that will be resulting in that of that basically that your Uchi as well as that Urahara placing order of those should expand instead of that which might be the case in the flavor from then that Rukia being aware of that is also like they will it's like the crossing that Rukia to be described like the point of that Rukia has deciding to like head down to that underground area at that her shop and basically herself that became herself that deciding to like unleash a great extent of like through powers and basically to seriously train Ichigo and that way yeah personally deciding to that ensure that like the eventual outcome ends up being not instead of that would be bringing down the but like Ichigo himself eventually end up has always like to end up be that the one to that bring down that the main strong villain that Jin in like the situation of that scenario. If you are realize that I'm not eventually okay, attempting at that way, that Turkey would be actually training to go and that training like I'm like even though initially if one like there would be a consequence in like yeah showing up to that train which is after like around the time that which go when we're done with like around this training. So hopefully at that point I'm like which go not taking Rukia seriously. But like at that point that yeah unleashing of like great extent of power and really at that point like it's go being totally shocked and like Rukia to different powers like pushing Ichigo to the edge during the training and usually that you actually like struggle during that training. Yes, like I'm looking like through yes, like training like yes, intent like getting fulfilled to a great extent where like I'm going through just training alone like which is attaining or having that thing search in like which was that present level of that strength like in the scenario that I'm bringing and definitely I'm bringing at that point yeah actually by the time like just training of go like yeah as well as like to with that the sprint happening in that is go then by then like if they have seen a six go to rid of the experience really confident and hopeful that easily which will be able to like bring down would be able to like get back for like that initial defeat against like Jin and will be able to like bring down and defeat Jin. They along the lines like which will be really hopeful and yet like I'm just like eventually uh in that like showdown fight against like Jin delivering like what to be eventually what the scenario to be like even though I'm probably fighting for like like a Yoshino once again having around up to like bring down Jin I think like basically without inspirating I'm so delivering that what like should I will be finding out about this like on for different like should I will go once again desperately wanting to like go up to like Yoshino to like state Yoshino but like at that point when I'm looking most likely not only Torahara but like not like the purity as well like blocking like the path of that Ishida and basically telling Ishida if that Ishida wants to like once again get himself in trouble and cause trouble to his like friends since like Ishida doesn't have any of his like 20 powers like percent percent more like thus Ishida want to that train and like regain back his like 20 power and get strong up and even increase his like 20 power and then for like Ishida to like go up to like Jin Jin's base in time Jin's like new base in time and basically to bring down Jin and the proper way and basically fail like instead of that project translation would be around the line something like Urahara or like your Richie asking should at that point and luckily at that point that if I would be only feeling that that what the steps is like right and that way like the training of like should by your Richie as well as like Urahara or like I Urahara is on like training into that reflective in the scenario that are particularly correct. So like that way I'm preparing that eventual scenario to be like for it to be certainly eventually I'm preparing for to be the Ichigo versus like Jin rebatch that I'm preparing to be like the first fight that will be in the happening before like Ishida will be facing off against like Jin like the scenario that I'm looking at. And in that Ichigo versus Jin fight like I'm preparing that even though Ichigo with like the surge in strength that upon the material Ichigo will be gaining through just training that even though Ichigo will be doing absolute everything against like Jin. So due to the fact of like Jin being about and Ichigo being a pro alone like and the like Ichigo still even though Ichigo would be doing only a certain extent of that damage to that Jin still by then that Jin would have only one for and defeat Ichigo select the scenario that I'm looking at. That's the most different that way like even with like just training like preparing for like Ichigo to like still fail and get defeated by Jin like the scenario that I'm looking at. And then eventually once like very bad once like the battle between like Ishida once like Ishida also finally making it out of his like training and once that battle between Jin and Ishida will be taken by the this time it's definitely to be for like Ishida instead of Ichigo that will be getting all that for that and like while like in front of Ishida and all of a sudden so the point stop to be Ishida that would be finally or if it was like 20 power that would have increased by that through the training that it would be finally Ishida that would be finally securing in that success or and defeated Jin the bound Jin yeah, while it's going through, by then would have certainly be fighting off against like the subordinates of that jet. while it would be issued out of the getting like the main villain, the current main villain still is like really good scenario that I'm looking over. Like, so like according to my definition, the flipping like solely to that without agency like at person that both biology as well as like Urahara if we currently break more effort instead of to go on instead of to be like the one to be able to say that going to be bring down Jin once like they will begin that proper training and we'll be able to like we can have we should regain back to like 20,000 like to reach like once it's like 20,000 will be through their training maybe along the lines of like the urban situation and plans for like instead of that like your as for Hara might be secretly having a like it might be of like such extreme priority for them to keep that fact get a like it's good because like the last thing they would be wanting will be for like because like they might be worried about like if Ichigo finds out about that like this Ichigo's like it might destroy Ichigo's like confidence and basically which already got easily destroyed on like Ichigo getting defeated once by Jen. So definitely that once like eventual fight against like Jen and like the boundaries will be happening like at that point for like Ichigo to be fighting like one of like the subordinates of like subordinate rounds of like Jen with that absolute confidence while it would be Ishida while Ishida would be fighting off against like Jen would be what like Yoroki as well as Kurahara might be wanting especially in the experience. So definitely that the next time to go will be facing off against like the rounds like definitely because they have to be like that strong presence of like Ishida uh, uh, while facing off Ishida will be being the one to like take the Jin. If we want like Kurahara as well as like Yoroki might be bonding certainly not surrender. So that before that platform it was to like just like after everything into his like training and to have his like confidence and moral be at like a high level would be definitely something that like you are just with Sohara would be definitely wanting to event and that would be such a, a big priority for them as well. It's definitely an impression like definitely at present like both Sohara as well as Yorochi would be doing the might be doing their absolute best to like hide that uh, that like they are placing all their hopes on that should have been able to that secret change and like are like prioritizing on training instead of like physical respect like that social information like to keep it to ensure to like keep it hidden from Ichigo would be of such great priority for like Yoruji as well as Urahara. That person might be like that different today that you might friends. Like Urahara might have been assigned like that almost love child work on at like Urahara stop to like ensure that like the secret of theirs like Ichigo never finds out about it might be also the case with you experience. But like I'm certainly from that, but yeah, certainly I'm also from that either already aware of this or like exactly or yeah, certainly finding out about this without experiencing. And at that point, that yeah, getting absolutely serious about like definitely wanting each of himself to be like definitely like to prove that for that you're around and to definitely not fall short this time as well. And definitely for Ichigo himself to be considered like it is actually like the one even without like like your training by Kukia herself training that for Kujigon itself to be like the person to like defeat like the main villains in this time as well would be definitely Rukia would be placing that as like a high priority and to be personal for Rukia and that way Rukia has that training to make that happen. It's like definitely the scenario there is something on the other direction. So like definitely my reaction right now is that like no for like we're rich by now might be well aware of that like around like you should have like soft on up towards like Yoshino and basically so that once like Yoshino left early once again to bring down Jim like at that point definitely I'm looking for that both for like your regime might have noticed that technical yet they might have consciously allowed like your regime to that head off might be like a newer and that might have been due to that the intent to like that they create that urgency of that training which like from that Ichigo to that succeed in like the training that like Urahara in like the I think it's like the path has given to like Ichigo while like Ichigo is was in like the situation of that desperate situation of like wanting to like save Rukia from that local fighting like the Marvel like definitely to create like such urgency and desperate situations like might be seen as like necessary or crucial fact by or as well as like your review for like an individual to like Sophie like quickly succeed in like the training might be like the case that new inference. So like definitely that way, even though Urahara as well as your regime might have noticed that while Black Yoshino had left Black for her stop Black, they might have constituted side to Black, not stop Yoshino. Might be one might have happened to them and prayers. But their eventual training, which they might be definitely to fundamental person might be planning for like Ishida to like totally succeed in that training. Like for like the rate of Black Ishida in that training to be that much higher due to that desperation to like save Yoshino. It's definitely might be very so like, but neither mentioned right now that like even though Jin has that confidence of that, yes, no, still concerning even after that, Jin like mentioned what third and which had escaped that definitely my mention right now is that yet like the like the situation that what might be going through Jin's might be that like even though Yoshino might definitely return back to where Jin has uh, yeah, like the next time Yoshino will be returning land, actually, Ishida might not come after that. Yoshino to like say Yoshino might be around the night that Jin might have that fear that the level frame. So because of that, actually, it is an option like friends land. So the maybe Jin might be so they think that if that's friends might not allow Ishida by to go off by himself to such danger and like Jin might be absolutely certain that Yoshino without any delay at all would be returning back to bring down Jin might be the case, definitely, but might be along the lines to that extent that Jin by now might know of like the gap of like Yoshino. Definitely when it's reimbursed. So definitely his boyfriend might not the next time he said that along with that Ichigo and so might definitely not come to Hashina for like Yoshino would be along the lines like rather than that like doing that like they would most likely formulating taking their time and formulating a plan strategical plan before like they would be like showing up at the next time to like say Yoshino. At that point would be along the lines like Jim might be strongly feeling definitely not which definitely Jin might be feeling impatient about that, and like Jin might want that, and like Yoshino, like Jin might totally want that Ishida to like also show up to like towards like Jin's location as soon as possible. Like Jin might be growing impatient and right now maybe that and might want to like steal away like Ishida like so since he's all like as soon as possible might be also the case that they want to the so like it might be due to that reason that I'm going to find that Gen at person like basically have revealed to that extent to the extent of its like bounty to a specific location. That specific location I'm definitely would be like the shop of like Urahara, where like at person like you and all of them are like basically so definitely it might be according to like Jin orders like Jin might have sent that the majority of it like bound to like Urahara's shop that by now Jin might not have figured that exact location where like it's going through and all of them and out. Uh, so like definitely Jin by now might have figured where exactly the exact location where like going through Shida is and basically that way like Jin might have given the order to like the majority of the like now to like go up to Sarahara's shop and basically to like abduct Ishida and basically like if on abducting Ishida definitely it's going to without much delay at all would be chasing after like Ishida would be one thing that would be far too obvious for like Jin might be the case technically with them. So like at that point for like Jin and like the bomb group might have set up like the already set up like the perfect trap. That point for like Jin and the bomb group to like repeat like their previous mistakes and that the next time that you went to will be showing up and then to like definitely ensure to like take out like to go and through as well as like the way for Jin to like without wasting much time to be able to like even using that to go and through by threatening Ishida with like the takeout of like it going through for like Jin to like that will force Ishida into like giving up his like 20 soul to Jin and basically at that point so for like Jin to like straight away take out like to go and then that way and basically like proceed with this like goal of like basically making it to like to the will be definitely Jim's like percent change of plan right now. Might be like that to take like a possibility that I'm about to bring up. Wait for like fundamental principle for like Jim to like not waste much time in like basically stealing away like the princess all of like Ishida and like that surgeon strength for like Jim to that most likely maybe quickly take out like the same of group members and they will steal away all the collected collective source that like each of like the bound members have collected within and is like present within them for like them to like absorb and take away all of those souls and basically to have an event for that in the spring and that way for like by then for like to think like taking away all those like light source like definitely at that point for like the connected like super amount of that's like good growth rate. Basically at that point for like Jim to definitely be able to like head on to that super amount of will be the definite might be like the definite plan of next gen right now itself. And this might be the reason for like right now itself like Jim totally deciding to like pick that clock and like Jim mentioned, which might be definitely this like spirit so which might be required for like Jim to be able to like while traveling through the tunnel to like to come out of like definitely that tunnel might be definitely exactly that an unstable tunnel exactly like the one through which like actually and through had basically traveled in like the past to the source society to like face Arabia. So like definitely there might definitely be that same unstability fact for like that tunnel connecting at that point that would be opening up that would be connecting like the human world to like Supermoon. So luckily for like Jim to be able to like make that safe travel to that Supermoon that could like clock which might be a spiritual might be definitely required in its like definite conditions. Might be the reason for like Jim all of the might have right now became impatient, and this might be the reason for like Jim right now itself like fixing that flaw. It might be like the reason for it is definitely might be very unpercent. Also, definitely I'm still in the mention that like sim like bounds having the limitation where like new bounds aren't born at all. Like so interpreting definitely Jim after that war in like the distant past uh between like the Quincy's and like the bounds like and different land, which might have definitely resulted in like the majority of like the bounds. I think that having taken out continuously like the bounce that only few rounds alone that remained. So like at that point, definitely Jin whom until that point might have been seeing like bounce as like the most powerful uh existence and everything like might have at that point might have through that shock of that war like might have uh, came down to like that actual reality of the situation where like the bound tribe might actually get wiped out since like those bounds have not gone. So definitely still might have had that fear second all of a sudden like as for like him totally even with like immortality like him like the muscle tail that him getting wiped out might have fear of that fear within like Jin to that extent that like it might be since then that Jin might have it might be according to like maybe Jin order that basically since then like basically after that one I think like basically which was when like all like light source was like totally slowed up by like the boundary that as well might have been back then according to like Jim orders like about the and the spring and for like that way for into like eventually steal all those lies or collective lies of from like Jim's own boundary eventually and then for like Jim to like probably make it to like Cucamonga that way to have like the tunnel at from like the world of moving to like Cucamonga to be opened up and basically that way at that point definitely the rush of like great number of like photos from like Cucamonga to like the world of the living would be happening. Would be definitely one thing that like Jin might be absolutely confident about. So like that way like Jin might be fixing like either like the entirety of like the follows to like a rush to like the world of like the humans or like at least like the majority of like the follows to like come continue to like the world of like humans. So like at that point for Jin to take advantage of that situation to like by then like by consuming all those life source and strengthening up like the power to like as much as like possible for them to like at that point to stealthily infiltrate into through that open tunnel to like to come out and basically for like Jin which like Jin's like exceptional strength to like totally overpower and rule over and create an army of like the few remaining follows that would be remaining at like Komodo and to like totally using that army of like follows to like for Jin to like totally next go up to like the South Friday and basically take out all the solar effect in that the South Friday. And that way, like on one side, while simultaneously to understand that while like the majority of the whole would be like causing all that chaos and like at like the world of like religion at like the human world, while Jin would be causing all that chaos Jin along with that group of that followers will be causing all that chaos in like the society that way like for like the balance between like the society and like the human world to totally go unbalanced and basically at that point since that it has already been revealed that like the society can't exist without like the human world and like the human world can't exist without like the society for like both like the society as well as like human world to get destroyed that way and before like the human world will be getting destroyed for like Jin to like probably abduct that a bunch of units and basically to possibly bring that to like few amount of for that and basically since like few amount of mention might so might have that independent existence which would be might be not dependent on whether society or like the human world exists for Jin to like that way he feels safe at like a few amount of along with that greater units that like genuinely affecting and bringing to that different level. And at that point, like since like acceptance strength, like even if left any follows even remain at active amount of what like him to take out those follows and basically for Jin to like that way. His plan might be to like that way, maybe that hoping that way at like certain amount of with like the person just like a bunch of humans like continue to always like remain immortal for like all eternity which might be that the ultimate goal, actually of like the ultimate extent of like the goals of like change. Definitely my very ambition that is pretty on it. Was like the ultimate expression that after that war like about between like frequencies and that the bounds like definitely in which like converted with the bounds might have gotten wiped out like and definitely like since like new bounds are not grown like Jin at that point might have had that atmosphere towards both frequencies as well as like the soul and like that fear might be well allied within change even to like the percentage might be like the actual situation of minimum because like when back then like back then might have maybe found out that basically inaccuracy totally something like it the war between like frequencies and like the one might have been definitely through lag the desire of lag and manipulation by sorts of like frequencies to like totally to use frequency to like bring down like the bounds which are for like that way for like sorts to be like the sorts to be like the dominant uh, tribe might be like the case that mean well like sorts like the and with the war like sorts like the might have fought a war against like the Bounce and might have also be embarrassingly lost against like the already superior strength of like the Bounce might have been what might have happened. So like that way sort of might have used like manipulated and used uh like the principle to like fight and bring down like the Bounce might have been what might have happened, especially by the revolution. So definitely change might have even after that war between like the Bounce and like the principles like change might have even found out about this. So like that way, like James like fear connecting towards like the not just like religious but also towards like soul purpose as well might have happened since then, and that fear might be alive to even to the present significance. James might have been that fear that might have caused James to like set up his like ultimate goal of like basically most likely wanting to like destroy like the world of like the living as well as like the soul and that way like wipe out like the entirety of like the remaining species if like any quinces remain as well as like the remaining soul recover and that way without any quinces or like soul recover and according to the revision once like they will be making it to eventually that way so like him to like at like the youth and when basically that way upon the mention to wipe out like all the followers as well that way through since like while during like the process of like simultaneous destruction of like both like the both like those society as well as like the world of living and that way for Jin to like that way only at that point to finally feel safe once like Jin would be able to like attain that eternal immortality might be definitely like Jin's plan certainly remembering so like definitely going to my question was like Jin might have like lied and told most likely lied and told to his own bound group, including Marquesinos as like Jin's like ultimate goal might have been that for like initially once like for them to like eventually open up like the tunnel to like to the window and definitely while like the rush of like huge number of followers, the majority of followers on his window will be arriving to like the world of living at that point for them to take advantage of that situation to like actually abduct like a bunch of like humans and basically for them to like for like them as a found to that to and rule over like the amount of that. would be along the line like Jim pull over like rule of Mundo and while rolling over like those affected humans and through those affected humans like definitely the bounce being able to like survive for like eternity uh, had like to amount of and basically that through that or like Elgin might at all that is like boundary that is like the rushing of that the great number of souls into like the world of like the human like definitely like the balance between like human and society would be definitely automatically like would be getting unbalanced and like both like the world of like the humans as well as like the society as well would be automatically getting destroyed. Both of them would getting destroyed, and by then, like they would have made it to Jin and like the boundary. There was like nothing else would have made it to that the world of all of like the moment of and basically with like the affected great number of humans and would be beginning like the ultimate rule over like the human and basically at that point like humans won't be able to like reject like the bound as they will be getting ruled over by like the bounds would be along the line the make of things Jin might have revealed to like Monkey Genos and like this like relating to might be like the case that minimum brain which is that I'm describing. And definitely in actually definitely targeting Monkey Genos would be desperate to like ensure that like the goal of that Jin definitely fails definitely might be like the case definitely once again even when saying all this like Monkey Genos in accident might be secretly hoping that like what plans of like Jin's of like Jin fails and is Jin intelligent and Jin as like bound to realistic bound to eventually gets like awkward and defeated and gets like wiped out. Would you on the night like Monkey Genos would be secretly hoping while saying all this dialogue definitely might have been very understanding like Monkey Genos even like making this like solitary that person even visible from like the world of living to like the to like the solitary person like society or that might be part of that with such strategical of like such strategy of like markets of like eventually uh, make like markets of course like into become a reality and for like change and like the wrong growth to be stopped and definitely markets might have definitely manipulated change and the boundary as for like why markets even like wanting to like basically make himself visible to like the society, which might lead definitely confuse definitely marketing of what marketing might not go selecting as like marketing of which to like get agent of to like get revenge on empathy and that way to like throw can definitely want like empathy will be something like marketing of like special project like empathy will be like showing up to after such a long time like empathy might not make sure to where to like Jim's left location and at that point for like Jim will be able to like take the light role of like Kenpachi and that way that aspect would be greatly helping Kenpachi who's like only strong would get on the night like market so might have thought about Kenpachi to and that way once like Jin would be like taking like the life store of like Kenpachi that would be for the helping Jin in like Jin go would be along the lines of like an excuse of like reason of like manipulation that like Marcos might have done to like Jim, and that way might have got like the permission from Jim to like only to like switch on like to make like Marcos like switch it pressure like visible to like uh, to like the sort of like the society might have been what might have happened like about the flame of the night. Actually, markets might have done that with the concept intent to like definitely by turning on to that making like spiritual pressure detectable from like the society to that in that way to that markets will be totally hoping that someone either can patch or like someone from that can patch just to like show up in terms of like markets and especially at that point for like markets to like secretly reveal to that squad member about like the realistic plans of like gym and like the bound group and that way for like multi that way by passing on that message to that eventually get help from like the uh, multiple squad captains from like the not just Kenpachi but like the multiple squad captains from that way the so society maybe even including get on the lines like markets might have hope and that way for if like they all collectively show up and that then all collectively might be able to like bring down gym and just like few members of like bound group and that way to that ensure that like gym like plan frame will be along the lines of like the plan and strategy that like markets might be using by doing everything is going right now. It's definitely my consideration consumption. So like definitely continuing trends and looking right now as for like priorities absence at like Kurahara's shop at present like might be definitely according to maybe like hostility plans between like Kurahara and Yoriji because like definitely Kurahara by now might have might be having like quite an idea as for like the kind of person that Yoshino is that like Yoshi's like totally unlike like the other bounds and wants to like stop like Jin and like the bound group might be along the lines maybe that Kurahara might have figured and Yoriji might have figured by now supplementary so like definitely that Kurahara as well as Yoriji might have came down to like or like Kurahara might have came down to the conclusion that like no matter how many times no matter even if they say that Yoshino that is might still like, head back to that head off to that bring down like the bounce all by herself and that so they are sitting in like Ishida who has like a on of course like Yoshino going after her again. Would be along the lines maybe Ohara might have figured that you know so like Ohara might have just been plan it's like Yoriji which might be for like Yoriji to like which might be according to that plan that like Yoriji might have went head off from like Ohara's shop even before like Yoshino had um, escape from like Ohara shop might be according to like Ohara's plan. So that leaves for like Yoriji to like Yoriji with that as step to like track both Yoshino as well as like Ishida once like Yoshino will be escaping and once like Ishida will be escaping after that to save Yoshino at that point for like Yoriji to like stealthily follow Ishida while concealing that Yoriji's presence and they be that way usually once like the next time Ishida will be getting into trouble like basically uh, and will be getting easily defeated by like the bounce like at that point for like that way for like Ishida to himself be able to like properly understand and realize that like should have in this like certain situation um it's like absolutely powerless without his like filthy powers like it's nothing they can't save Yoshino or like that reality to like would be properly set in with it should have so that like at that point for like the core like the bounce capture like should have for like your review to like rushing and you should have once again and basically then to for like your receipt like bring Ishida to like Urahara's shop and basically then for like Urahara as well as like your receipt to like give the train visit train to Ishida to bring for like Ishida to like regain back to like 20 powers as well as like to show that 20 powers as like the only way for like Ishida to be able to like save uh that Yoshino to make Ishida actually realize this and act accordingly through such like hard lessons might be along the lines of the primary last or like your origins might have like it's definitely might be and this like given the scenario as well that I was able to like I'm a friend and definitely as like right now as like as like when they running off the lecture to like save Yoshino on this point such any local scenario and that makes uh that was only through like your origins help like sending back to like what shop and then figuring this like training that like sort of harder like you're this like things in order that you know the friendship. So that the Nathan friendship right now that a business plan right now might be solely through any extent of like helping for like you know to like somehow steadily be able to like steal away like Jin's like trust and for like you know to be able to like to destroy Jin's trust and even though that might not be other than like you know as well getting taken off yet like using Uji that we're planning on like taking out Jin as well as like all the uh, members of like Jin together with like you know by destroying Jin like by seizing and through any through such absolute stealth like seizing Jin's trust and destroying it definitely will affect that like we have optimal solution to bring right now exactly like how Jin has like tricked to Kodagawa which might have been what might have happened like the trust is like Kodagawa before getting taken out had believed that he had purpose that belongs to like Jin like basically might have been fake crust that like that lack of weight looks similar to like the original crust in like sim of just which like Luminous South might have created to while being even by then being fully aware about that Kuragawa's lack of loyalty might be like the case especially with Prem. So like I was different like them right now most likely using that very same strategy against like Yoshino as well to like totally realistically trick Yoshino as well like the scenario that I'm so like Yoshino right now I'm very much on the fake acting like totally managing to like see like the crunch from Jin and like Yoshino totally assuming that it's like Jin like the crust and like Yoshino destroying it quickly but like at that point like Yoshino having that shock of like the doesn't realize that she has gone like a scenario that I'm doing. But like unlike in like Odagawa's case, like I'm definitely like things that they not taking out the like the scenario that I'm talking about referring because like definitely Yoshino might be a whole lot exceptionally superiorly stronger than Kodagawa might be like that's with the cities. So like things might definitely want Yoshino for like by the time like the tournament to like by the time like Jin would out uh attain like the 24 of like Futura, like at that point with that who got the strength like Jin might be only planning on like taking out each and every single one of like Jin's like song group members including stealing all their light source including like all the light source that they have collected of time. And they see that at that point, like even taking like the life soul of like Marquesinos, like just might be definitely part of like stealthy realistic plan. Self plan might be like that's ridiculous. But like at that point, for like Jin to like also take away like soul as well might be Jin's plan. It's definitely not very efficient. Jin might be also saying that basically Jin would definitely require a lot of like exceptional strength for him to even be able to like say that like and that exceptional strength that Jin at person might be able to see through for Jin to be able to like attain troops by stealing away like the princess soul of like life into soul of like Ishida alone like Jin might be able to like attain that level of strength would be like along the lines like the path of they must definitely have friends and definitely it might have been solely with like not likely refusing to like eventually ending up fed up and case refusing to things like human souls that I'm looking for like might have like started to like end up getting beat up and beat up. And that way might have been how that might have ended up that way, might have ended up like even beat up than like becoming even beat up than Funagawa might have been what had happened in like the last 15 minutes direction, but still naturally like Sin might be fully aware that like if Jin gets for any means of Jin even for the possible means like if Jin gets like Yoshino to like consume like human toys like at that point like Yoshino's like strength would be returning back to her of the level of strength and at that point like Yoshino would be far superiorly once again far superiorly stronger than Nagawa's level of strength. So like definitely like Jin might be totally seeing Yoshino as like a bound member in this decade of that's like not totally unlike not expendable unlike um uh Nagawa might get into like Jin might be seeing that Yoshino has definitely might come the way. So like I was supposed that kind of thing for like me for like knowing where exactly the origin of that Jin just like get maybe a book and back to thing at like some secret hidden location within like Jim's mansion, which like Jim might have believed that Jim alone knows, but like which like Yoshino might have steadily might steadily by Jim might have found out. It's like one talking to that and different of like the trust of Jin but maybe Jin might always keep it on a specific forget of that Jin about which like none of the other bonds might be aware of like the Yoshino might have lessons like knows that might be knowing lesson way more than the other towns like I'm saying that definitely that might be knowing where exactly English spoken of like the gen that like gen might be putting like so like definitely your plan right now is definitely that like definitely you also might be also knowing that definitely by fighting taking on gen with like last definitely won't be even if it's through a sacrificial self-destruction attack like which the different might be that they having that. Even with that attack like definitely on the different like would know by now might be most likely absolutely certain that like even with that powerful self-destruction attack of like they won't be able to like bring down Jin. Might be along the lines of that thing that like Yoshino might be very fully aware by now. At present, the blue print, so like Yoshino's like plan inactivity might be to like complete distract distract Jin by making having like Goethe fight Jin while Yoshino for like Yoshino to like either steadily sneak up behind Jin and to like try to like steal Jin's like original cup from his like pocket or like for Yoshino to that sneak up into that the mansion while Jin would be Jin would be fighting Gote and like for like Yoshino to like directly like take that take that portion trust of like Jin which might be filled up at like some specific location which like Jin might be doing that him alone knows. It's like no that's what that but like I'm putting like scenario to be like before like Yoshino regardless like this to possibly like before like Yoshino would be actually be able to like get to make it towards like pleasing Jin like trust of interest like and the different like I should have right now already having showed up to Jin's like mansion and the different like it should have ended like happening before like Yoshino would give like a hands on like first like personal dynamic. So like straight away like to Jin by now might be aware that there is like someone maybe that about like Yoshino having this like soft corner towards like Yoshino. So definitely I'm looking Jen probably before like Yoshino would be able to like make it worse like trust like and like totally once like Fisher only showing up that totally character Fisher up. And Fisher has not at all being able to like train himself due to like Fisher up like lack of acting skills like in the past like personality that I'm so like Jin at that point is threatening Yoshino with like taking Fisher out and basically that way Yoshino getting stopped. Which lacks the potential other possible scenario that I'm also right now. So like the movement right now is definitely for like the moment Ichigo and Renji will be setting off for the last step to like say Ishida like I'm totally different like the moment they go on like I'm totally different like Urahara in with like a field space like I'm most likely telling like the remaining of like Ichigo's group to be at that point tell the work set up to like for all of them to like sit down and patiently listen to like Urahara. And at that point Urahara like a field space so that telling all of them that basically that Ichigo and Renji definitely won't be able to Ichigo won't be able to like defeat like Jin. Not even with like Renji felt like Ichigo won't be able to like defeat Jin will be one thing that I'm looking for that absolute seriousness I'm looking for like Urahara telling to all of the DPS crew members and that totally preparing once like Rukia will be hearing that from Urahara like that will be causing a disturbance within that Rukia like the scenario that I'm playing and definitely Urahara at that point will be revealing to them as for like Urahara and like your which is like secret stepping plan which will be that basically right now itself like without any delay like your that we have sent out like your to precisely due to like them from expecting such a present situation and for them to like probably for your entity to like probably bring Ishida back to like for her shop and that way at that point for like them to like probably trick Ishida into putting Ishida into like an extremely pressurized situation so that like that will be the only way Ishida will be able to like regain back access to his like 20 powers and like only a 20 will be able to like defeat Jin will be along the lines of that seriousness that Rohara will be telling to Lakurdi and all of them. It's like at that point, it's like scenario that I'm and for like the training of like you should have to be a sort of like definitely for that absolute perfect situation to be possible. Like definitely like tracking of like you should have is like what like Rohara and Yoroji have planned to be along the lines that Rohara would be telling them and like Rohara will be straight away like using one of this like special device and like creating another underground location and would be telling like all the remaining crew members of like go to that underground location and to do like training and prepare themselves for like the ultimate fight battle against like eventual battle against like Jin and his like bound crew while he will be while Ishida he will be right now itself like you will be bringing Ishida once like your originally bring Ishida to like Urahara's shop, like at that point Urahara would be totally he would be totally lying to like Ishida by telling that once like Ishida left like Urahara's shop like that like Urahara had sent Yoriji after like Ishida and that way Yoriji had saved was able to like save Ishida and bring Ishida back to like Urahara's shop. But like at that point like was like Urahara would be telling such a lie to that Ishida and like also would be telling Ishida that basically once like Ishida left like basically like Ichigo and like Renda as well had set out to like save uh save Ishida even after like Urahara had sent out like here to be along the lines like Urahara will be like to like Ishida at that point. So that like basically that absolute pressurized situation to be possible to happen for like Ishida where like all of the like Ishida front Ichigo as well as like the entire like Ishida front along with like Yoshino all of them in like this kind of situation with like while them all will be getting captured or like will be battling against like the bomb like that is in which like they had already previously lost against like the Jin and like Ichigo had lost against like Jin like once again them going to that battle and that or the entire reason for all of that being solely due to that should have chasing after like version of or like that kill to be formed within Ishida, as well as that way that also for that extreme urgency to be formed within like Ishida to like as soon as possible for him to be able to like save Ichigo and like the entire from like Jin and like the boundary. And that while at that point like in that that's a personal situation for like a majority of the left for her to like take advantage of it to like give that training to like Shida to that way for Shida to not only gain that something but also to like unlock that even for the to also have the thing is like spring up. Would be along the lines of the spring like the plan like and one like each one range would be setting up using that much stuff like to save it like at that point it's a combo to spring like telling to that which was like friends at that point. It's like training scenario that and the one for it and not the training. So like but league like friends and right now that like might definitely lies to consider about like didn't have normal use for like consider even every time not having active tools like in the past like right now by threatening Ishida with like putting Yoshino into like danger like Jin might be right now trying to like away for put Ishida into like such a right situation so that like basically for that absolute due to that absolute need for like to save Yoshino to like cause like Ishida in such pressurized situations to be able to like to talk to Shabak to once again be able to like access gain back access to his like with the power flash. This might be definitely what like right now Jin would be right now authentic by threatening Ishida with like putting Yoshino in danger definitely might be very advantage. So for himself from the thing that even though Ishida will be in that pressurized situation like from the thing that with like Ichigo as well as like Renji showing up like and like at that point like that corporate situation that reducing to a certain extent for like Shida because like with like Ichigo showing up like as usual like Ichigo will be able to like bring down fight against like also the along the lines of like that feeling that will be getting still formed within like Shida. Even though I would be concerned about Ichigo and Randy at that point of like the scenario that way that pressure reducing within like price feeling reducing within like Shida and like definitely yeah, like at that point, it's like one practice is going to will be showing up on like at that point, it's definitely like Jin's like team members like Monty Incidos as well as like the other account member of the team who were with like Jin recently. So different like them coming out of hiding and they straight away fighting. Like Ichigo and Renji is like this now and at that point, I'm the friend for Killian was likely like Monty Incidos that will be fighting off against like Ichigo while like the other bound that would be fighting off against like 20 like the snap that I was about to correct and my to understand like while straight away like while Ichigo as well initially I'm looking that back like was looking like initially like Ichigo as well as like Frenchie getting awkward and it would be in like a struggling kind of like situation against like Marcos Jonas as well as like that other found member of like the scenario that I was saying. And I'm just trying to be exactly at that point while like Jin would be totally within like Jin will be exactly and eagerly waiting for like the moment to like happen for like the pressurized situation to that cause like to be able to like get access back to his like 20% like at that point is when I'm whispering like most likely Yoran's showing up and like taking escaping the flag Shida at that point is like the scenario that I'm like and definitely Yoranji might have been waiting for like such a situation while hiding close to flag to manage to get the Yoranji's level of like acceptance levels of like stealth like I think like Yoranji was like part of like the leader of existence was I think like about definitely Yoranji is like stealth um, stealth powers might be like stealth skills might be possible bigger. So definitely you might have definitely you know need to like recognize realize like your stealth is something so like definitely one in that way like theology escaping the flag Ishida way geology escaping the flag Ishida alone back to like or Hara's like shop and at that point like once like geology would bring Ishida there like American it would be just like Urahara alone that will be present there while Urahara concentration would have totally revealed the plan to that which was like front and basically might have hidden them away in that separate underground like training area and like it was like a was chat or in that also to be in that absolute going through that absolute strain with that absolute spell in that separate underground area while like the while like at that point is when I'm looking like if it off like training by like Urahara as well as like Yoriji would be beginning at that point is like the finale that I'm looking at in there. So like definitely like for instance right now is that like every bouncing like tall creature might be having their core rule, which might be that like one dog might not end up, won't ever end up like the trust of like another thought is contain already contain that the dog of like another belong to another dog might be like the case that you know. So like right now at present like I'm like with like more love that they have towards like have towards like Yoshino like I'm saying right now exactly how Jin might be trying to take advantage of it might be through right now with like Jin destroying that thing on that Yoshino like thing of like I'm delivering right now like the situation might be that get about to get taken off so that with like I think that being like the art of ego of that Yoshino, like Yoshino as well right now would be about to get taken off. So like the I'm wondering like Jin right now was like they telling Goethe that like if Goethe wants to like save its like mother Yoshino, then like Goethe to break its like core and basically to get it to like enter into like Jin's like crust. And Jin's crust would be definitely proliferating might be definitely contain like Jin's like original soul, which might be a female soul, definitely one thread. So like that way like get it uh, which might only be like a male dot like on entering that crust of like gen like it's like the scenario that I'm putting. So like at that point like I'm different like with the ritual. At that point might be when like the like ritual would be getting performed definitely my different and the different got to be a spell like ritual and probably bring like once that ritual is like done like I'm different that once that spell like ritual is like recited like at that point I'm different that what might happen might be that instantly um uh, either a single offspring or like multiple offspring instantly would be getting formed. It's definitely much better. Newborn dog would be happening. It's like the scenario instantly is like scenario that I'm looking and looking like maybe like the aspect like how many times these ritual the ritual might be able to be performed that there might be absolutely no limit to it. It's definitely not so like that way like James might have figured that there's absolutely no limit to like how many newborn dogs can be created through this like repetition of like this ritual as many times as like James wants. And that way James Plant might be working alone to be that ultimate individual power but whom alone would be at that point focusing like an entire unlimited army of like dogs in his like and like that way for like James to be like the strongest in like the world in all the worlds that were like the society or like the human world or like the world of all would be along the lines like Sin might be totally uh it might be that Jin's like current plan and like might be what like Jin might be totally hoping like all that Jin alone like about like Jin alone like was in such great number of like bounds will be make instantly making like Jin the strongest ever. Strongest individual ever would be along the lines like Jin might be okay topic is definitely not the and I'm definitely prepping right now for like the scenario to be like Jin succeeding at that only to a certain extent where like like while Jin Jin probably succeeding in like creating maybe like six or like 10 like newborn counts and that and by the time like Jin will be would have created like an army of like total number of pounds of like maybe uh, around 10 or like 6 that by the number different like the number different right now itself like unity or maybe much crazy like showing up and like saving escaping with like should have like the scenario that I'm doing. So like that way by the time that change would be repeatedly performing this ritual and this ritual as well that might not be performable like in a consecutive instant manner. The minimum presence like the ritual itself might take some time to perform and like after like and it might be like only once a day like this ritual might be able to be performed might be also the case for limit direction. There might be that one ritual a day limitation for this ritual is also like the possibility that so like definitely that way on the different like items and like most like a continuum direction you are also showing up and it be escaping with like Kishira and I'm just bring that for like 5 or 6 days that I'm just bring that Kishira like going through that extreme training by Swarahara and Black Origin. and on the sixth day, like and the spring was like we made like Ishida. So he coming back to like gym like this by then like gym will be having a total of like 6 or 7 like pound army with him. And that way like the Quincy should have like after like retaining back like 20 powers and throwing that 20 powers like replacing of against single handedly against like gym with like 6 of 7 of freezer. Like and that way in that fight like should I which is struggling his game to like still begin to do or and debating and taking out like all the bound of like gen one by one. There's like things that are including data as well. Different like after like being under like the controls of after entering like the trust of like gen about the like and the like gen will be and then absolute control over like data and like to be a trap set for like data that like after like entering the trust of like gen to different like data to like completely change data can to like completely change and platform to be as realistic as like gen and only taking over from gen was like bringing the cinema parameter of the front end of the brain. So like the Lehman experience right now, technique or like Jim to like right now, so he said get there that basically get there want to like save it's like mother like Yoshino then like get there has to like survive and get there want to like survive then get there has to like feels with like Jim will be along the line like Jim is with like get there and that way that with like Jim already having a dog fuse with like Jim Gen formed or that used with like Gen like and that way that get there as well using with like Gen to like save usually like with an arc that under the road and that way like these two dots like already fused within like Gen and Gen functional dot and definitely will be like a female dot. Definitely friends on that something want to like get a building of like male dot so sort of new friends. So definitely I'm just like it would be then that this ritual will be getting performed and at that point like I'm referring like new dot will be getting spawned actually especially my different and it's like the protect was to be a single dog and I'm still the mention form that to be that limitation for like the ritual only performable once each day is like new branch. So like each time a new dog gets spawned like to be automatically getting fused with like it's like given range. So that like I'm friend by the time like you should have to be like going to be fighting off and gaining back the flat powers and 50 powers and like will be fighting off against like Jin numbers like Jin body most likely containing like the power of at least like the combined powers of at least 6 or like 7 dollars with like the scenario that I'm looking for the right and of the range. So like actually my theory and question right now is that like the remaining the majority of like the bound members of like Jin that like Jen has been able to have sent off to a specific location. Might be like the exact location of that where like the ritual might be performed depending on the brain machine. So like the ritual might be only performed at that specific location depending on the ritual. So like the majority of like the remaining bound members might be exactly the at like that location and might have by now already completed like the performance of like, the ritual and while that placing that like while performing the ritual like while placing the target of like that ritual as exactly being Jin supplement brain. So like Jin body might right now might already contain like the effects of like that ritual already at present is supplement brain. So like right now as like Yoshino is like only in the order to like Goethe and like Goethe is like charging towards like Jin like and definitely for like Goethe as like Goethe like spirit. I think like basically it's like about like attack and take out like Jin numbers like the moment like they will be making contact with like Jin if they're getting fused with like Jin is like the scenario that I'm looking at like and Jin instantly gaining like the power of like add powers make up of his own door like Jin instantly at that point was like gaining like the power of next or get as well is like the scenario that I'm looking at and that being that absolute shock for like Yoshino is like the scenario that I'm looking at. So, but the mention of so people that version of at present maybe on like the point of getting taken off like on the spring so lead to like get like usually offering get it to like charge towards like Jin which may while trying to like take Jin out like at least the information for like get they actually ending up using the like Jin people that which are like the scenario that I'm playing and at that point I'm looking like Goethe who has been predictably like the alter ego of like the moment Goethe will be using with like Jin and like Goethe ending up being Jin like alter ego, especially when so like that type of like that alter ego type between like Yoshino and Goethe and so the most likely ending like the moment they would definitely ended up using the lecture. Like the scenario that I'm going to operation. And that way, like I'm different that would be surviving at that point. At the moment like they would be using food question. It's like the scenario that I'm visible to the at that point, to preparing for like not just surviving, but like the bound elements within like will be all getting removed from like and like the moment they will be used at any of actually about the using is like at that point it's like turning into like a human is like the scenario that I'm basically preparing and then crazy. So like definitely my personal introduction right now is for like the Yoshino versus like Jin like found fuse like back lambda for different purposes and eventually reaching like the point where like I'm like made that one of like the bound member of like Jin whom Jin has like a sent out to specific location who might be definitely part of like the remaining team bound members that will be performing this like ritual and like according to like Jin's plan like Jin might have told him that specific bound member of like the classes to like basically send to like let Jin know once like the ritual is like almost completed. Was like the case that like, might be the case that new friends. So like most likely I'm bring that bound member with like the glasses. I'm bring scenario to be like that bound member with like the glasses like the will be almost about to be completed like when sending his like dot which totally has this like eyeball like flight like like that dot of him like one of those dots like I'm doing things so he's sending towards like Jim's like current location to like give that signal to like that basically the service like almost about to be completed. So like at that point I'm putting like while it's like at that point I'm putting like Jim in an unexpected manner like totally capturing Yoshino and not letting go of like those mid battles like Kushnar that I'm working. And I'm looking at that point without maturity like the ritual getting completed. And at that point I'm looking like maybe for that moment like the entire ritual might be. And at that point I'm looking like Jin like the Thor fuse Jin and like the Thor fuse like Yoshino ending up fusing. It's like at that point so the ritual is like the scenario that I'm looking. So like that way like the Jin's like ultimate current plan of like the ultimate individual getting formed with like a gen version of fuse form as well as like the human fuse form like the happening at that point is like full scenario that I'm all everything. So and so like Jin's like current power levels might be like far greater than like that of like Yoshino. I'm talking about like in that fuse form between like Jin and Yoshino and like for that fuse form like like to be uh like the dominant factor would be like Jin and his like villains will be having that absolute control over that ultimate individual once that ultimate individual is formed which will be having like the power of like a villainous Goethe as well as like Jin Kongto and will be like a fuse form like Jin and Yoshino while having like thoroughly having like the villains of like Jin taking the dominance and control. It's like such a realistic calculated form at that point. It's like things but such accepting to be the power of like the scenario that are visible for example generation. That way according to my generation like I'm so different like the result would be completed like up to like huge flow like jumps like the fuse fusion happening like I'm like there to be a huge flow and light shining and everything. Like the scenario that I'm in. So like at that point by then like I'm like to go would have totally overcaught market and will be charging straight towards like the Jin Yoshino was formed at that point is like the scenario that I'm saying and like only his goal would be like at that point trying to like take on like the Jin Yoshino fuse form. But like I'm talking the Jin Yoshino fuse form like easily with such absolute ease like totally with like single attack and like setting Ichigo flying and like getting right line with like the scenario that I'm saying and Ichigo will be getting shocked at that point as well as like seeing like witnessing like the exception to because funny of like the change of views forms like the scenario there. So like at that point is when I'm looking that most likely your we might be hiding like at that point like realizing like that absolute need to like interfere and to like escape with like Ishida as well as well as arranging else like they're easily getting taken off by his like Yoshino Jin youth forms would be along the lines Yoshino I mean like Yoshino would be seeing that absolute danger and that way like Yoruchi like saving and escaping him with like Ichigo Renji as well as like Ishida and making it back to like Kurahara shop of like the scenario that I'm looking for the right now. also definitely no friends right now that usually in like the case of like Yoshino, it might have been solely like the love that Goethe had has towards like Yoshino, that might have made it for like the fusion between like Goethe and Yoshino. But in the case of like Jin, as to like how exactly like the fusion with like in the case of Jin with his own thought might have happened like might have been solely through Jin like was likely discovering either knowing about or like discovering some sort of like specific ritual which might be only performable only once, especially in my ritual, and like and Jin might have definitely performed that ritual himself to that way that have the fusion between like Jin and his own thought happen. Might have been what might have happened in like Jin's case, and like it might have been something that Jin might have done all the way in like the distant past after like the distant past war between like the Quincy and Brown might have definitely. I think that it was in like the majority of like the bound getting wiped out. Like might be at that point like the using that fear setting in within like Jin maybe back then, which might also setting like Jin desperately something and finding about like this like forbidden ritual. Might be totally a forbidden ritual and like Jin might have done that to like cause that fusion to like happen with like Jin's so might be what might have happened in like this bus with new brain. Upon the totally bring that might be not only Jin but like all like the remaining bound members of like Jin group might want badly want to like quickly fuse with their bounds, but like I'm saying like it might have been solely due to like Jin in like that long distance pass like most likely already using up like that ritual and causing Jin to like get fused with like the that ritual which might be only performed only once like which like Jin might have done might have been like the sole reason for like Jin's like remaining found members having fused with their found it's definitely my variation. This one that definitely my good variation right now. It's definitely for like right now itself for like Jin to like definitely make that absolute difference on his own found members with like Jin's like newborn army of like found like I'm totally cutting then straight away like ordering all those like army of like newborn dogs to like straight away attack his own found member group. It was like Jane would be right now feeling so strongly or confident with in like right now covering this like huge army of like newborn dogs and like the situation would be like Jane most likely might be able to like recite like the same ritual over and over again and would be might be able to like create like more and more armies of like newborn dogs himself might be like the contributions of new information. Still leaning more towards the probability of like Jin maybe having like the limitation of that only being able to like repeat the recitation of like that ritual every day. Definitely might have be and so like definitely right now Jin will be totally feeling would be getting totally confident and will be totally feeling that this like some group members like as like totally useless anymore and like they are unneeded. And basically definitely I'm looking like right now that like do like Jin ordering this like newborn bounce like I'm to attack like his own bound group members and them all getting taken out except for like solely except for like Marquez alone. Was like the scenario that I'm supposed to bring. I'm totally differently most sadly for like scenario to be right now itself like you're already showing up and basically like the newborn bound some of the different like would be also showing up would be like straight away showing up to like take out like Ishida as well as like Ichigo as well as like Renji as well as like the scenario that I'm looking. But like at that very last second as they will be getting about to get taken out by this like by this army of newborn bound like I'm looking at that very last second like most likely you're already showing up and like saving and escaping with like Ichigo Renji as well as if it has like scenario that I'm referring. But in the case Maki Ichino-san, so different most likely for like scenario to be like as likely newborn bound will be able to take out Maki Ichino as well. That at that very last second I'm just most likely Kenpachi. Most likely Kenpachi along with like the squad members like showing up and basically most likely like saving Maki Ichino and escaping with like Maki Ichino's for the time being like now that was a like question of the mission. So such an absolute shocking betrayal for like the bound group members, including Marquesinos from Gen side is what I'm looking for right now. That is really that happened. Especially my degree impression. So also especially my degree impression right now is for like what might be like the fucking situation of like Jin might be like after like Jin had taken out Yoshino like what might have happened might be like the spirit of like the fused Yoshino Goethe spirit like might have been like the green element which that using like the ritual like Jin might have sealed onto like the ritual field and might have through the ritual Jin's own spirit of the uh, of Jin as well as as well as Jin's soul and different that spirit element as well through the ritual might have both used the ritual to create all those new compounds might be what might have happened is a new information and this spirit element of Yoshino and Goethe is spirit element might feel that person might be sealed and contained within the spiritual seal and Jin might have most likely added that to after sealing and Jin might have added it to its own crust on its chest might be what might have happened sibling or friend. So it might be that person might be stored at Jin crust on the chest especially when preparation. It might be like a sibling or preparation. So actually whenever that way Jin's configuration might be whenever each type Jin might be easily able to bring out the spirit element of Yoshino get a spirit element and through the recitation of the scripture with most likely limitation of once a day Jin might be able to create this each day an entire army of neutron dogs like of Jin might be the situation that might be very inflection right. So upon the membration of different of Kenpachi showing up and solely due to Kenpachi and the squad, the Kenpachi squad showing up Marquez, getting saved even after by the betrayal of Jin according to membration. Definitely then of was different most likely for Kenpachi and squad most likely meeting up with Ichigo and Ichigo squad most likely at or shop. And it will be from there that the entire gang, these two gangs having the whole discussion and basically brainstorming with what and trying to come up with plans as to what to do next and how to possibly defeat and bring up Jim and his army of new compound or it's the scenario that I'm not the different for to be much likely during that whole point that so different Martin was finally realizing his mistakes and that he had totally misjudged Kenpachi and such of there being that absolute empathetic and concerned side within Kenpachi was which always existed which Martin had failed to realize and that being focusing on Kenpachi saving marketers and all that in the different at that point as how to stop I'm looking at marketers shockingly come to such realizations that markets even apologizing to Kenpachi and basically marketers at that point even telling Kenpachi that basically once this is over that marketers will be feeling hopeful at that point and will be feeling platform after being reunited with Kenpachi and this spot and the squad and everything. So Liam is at that point of market in Kenpachi once they would be finally defeating and bringing down Jin at that point of Kenpachi would be taking markets back to Kenpachi squad would be along the line markets would be after was after markets would be apologetic to Kenpachi. So they also doing this after that. But that markets was even asking Kenpachi that it's also if Kenpachi will be taking things back to his squad. It's also in the scenario that I'm looking at and definitely I'm the point Markets was definitely surviving this whole chain up with the scenario that one Jin will be finally defeated I'm definitely trying next match is running back to the society back to as part of Kenpachi squad. It's the scenario that I'm really trying to reaction right now.